The Uninvited Guest, Chapter 1, A New Foundation. The sprawling silhouette of Blackwood Manor rose against the bruised New England sky like a forgotten promise. Its Gothic gables, widow's walk, and countless diamond-paned windows, each reflecting the nascent dusk with a melancholy glint, seemed to breathe in the damp, briny air. Elias Thorne, a man whose shoulders carried the weight of blueprints, both failed and half forgotten, felt a familiar knot tighten in his gut. This house, this colossal monument to a bygone era, was meant to be his fresh start, his redemption. "It's imposing," Lily, his 17-year-old daughter, drawled from the back seat, her voice laced with the theatrical skepticism only a teenager could master. She clutched her headphones, a silent barrier against her parents' misplaced optimism, her gaze sweeping over the estate's tangled grounds. The once manicured gardens had succumbed to a wild, untamed beauty, brambles clawing at ancient stone walls.
Clara, Elias's wife, disagreed with a bright, determined smile. "It's magnificent, Lily. Look at the craftsmanship, the history." She squeezed Elias's arm, her touch a hopeful anchor. Clara, with her sun-kissed hair and an unwavering belief in silver linings, was the perpetual warmth to Elias's often chilled pragmatism. She had championed this move from their sterile suburban life, envisioning long walks, cozy evenings by a roaring fire, and the quiet balm of nature healing the unspoken wounds of their recent past, a failed architectural venture that had nearly bankrupted them, and more painfully, Elias's self-esteem. Elias managed a thin smile, pulling the old Volvo up the gravel drive. The crunching sound was the only disruption in the profound silence that enveloped Blackwood. The air hung thick with the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and something else. Something faintly metallic, like old coins. "It's certainly substantial," he conceded, scanning the imposing facade.
He was an architect, after all. He understood foundations, structures, the bones of a building. He wanted to understand this one, to master it. The front door, a heavy slab of dark oak carved with intricate swirling patterns, creaked open with an almost theatrical groan as Elias pushed it. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying the scent of aged wood, dust, and something indefinable, like faded potpourri and secrets. Sunlight, strained through ornate leaded glass, cast kaleidoscopic patterns on the wide central staircase that spiraled upwards into shadow. Dust motes danced in the ethereal shafts, like tiny, forgotten spirits. "Hello?" Clara called out, her voice echoing unnervingly in the vast space. "Anyone home?" Lily snorted. "Just the ghosts, Mom." A shiver traced Elias's spine, despite himself. He'd always dismissed such notions. A house was a house, walls, a roof, a floor. But Blackwood Manor felt different. It felt observed. They spent the first few hours in a whirlwind of boxes and wonder, exploring the myriad rooms. There were too many to count, each with its own character. A grand ballroom with a decaying crystal chandelier, a library lined with empty shelves that seemed to beckon to unseen tomes, a conservatory choked with dead plants. Clara found joy in every dust-sheeted antique. Lily grudgingly admitted the attic held a strange appeal, and Elias, with his architect's eye, meticulously inspected the plasterwork, the joists, the integrity of the century-old structure. The house, for all its age, was remarkably sound, a true testament to its builders. As evening descended, painting the mist-shrouded landscape in shades of violet and gray, they gathered in what would become their living room, a space with a vast stone hearth that Elias had, miraculously, managed to wrestle a fire into. The crackle and warmth pushed back the encroaching chill of Blackwood.
They ate pizza out of boxes, their laughter echoing through the unfamiliar silence, a small island of domesticity in the grand, echoing house. Later, as Elias helped Clara unpack a box of kitchen essentials, he paused, a ceramic mug in hand. Did you order something?" he asked, frowning at the ornate, cream-colored envelope tucked beneath their pile of mail.
It wasn't a utility bill or a junk flyer. It was thick, heavy parchment, sealed with a dark crimson wax bearing an indecipherable crest. The script, a flowing copperplate, spoke of an elegance long vanished. Clara took it, her brow furrowing. "No, I haven't even set up forwarding yet for half our subscriptions. What is it?" Lily, drawn by their curiosity, peered over Clara's shoulder. "Looks like something from a period drama. Is it our official invitation to the housewarming party for the house?"
Clara chuckled, tearing open the seal with a careful finger. Inside, a single card. She read aloud, her voice softening as she deciphered the elegant calligraphy. "You are cordially invited to an evening of classical music, featuring the esteemed Blackwood Quartet. Saturday, October 27th, promptly at 8 o'clock in the Grand Ballroom, Blackwood Manor. Attire, formal. Please respond by the 24th. A beat of stunned silence. Elias exchanged a look with Clara. Lily giggled, a nervous edge to her mirth. "The 27th is tomorrow night," Elias said slowly, pulling out his phone to check the date. "And the Grand Ballroom?" He gestured vaguely to the dust-sheeted cavern down the hall, which currently housed nothing but forgotten grandeur and a faint echo of decay. "The Blackwood Quartet?" "We just moved in," Clara murmured, rereading the card. "Who would? How would anyone even know we're here? We haven't told anyone but the real estate agent."
"Maybe it's a wrong address?" Lily suggested, though even she didn't sound convinced. The envelope was addressed simply to the occupants, Blackwood Manor. Elias walked to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain. Outside, the mist had deepened, swirling like phantom dancers through the ancient trees. The vast expanse of the estate was utterly dark, save for a faint, flickering light in what he recalled was a disused stable block, barely visible through the swirling vapor. He squinted. A trick of the light? Or was someone out there? "It's a prank," he decided, trying to inject certainty into his voice, though the knot in his stomach tightened further. "Some local kids, maybe, welcoming us to the neighborhood." Clara, ever the optimist, considered it. Or a very eccentric neighbor who's heard we've moved in and thinks this is a charming gesture. Lily, however, was already shaking her head. "No, Dad, Mom, this feels wrong."
Elias dismissed her, though her unease resonated with his own. He crumpled the invitation and tossed it into the crackling fire, watching the elegant script curl and blacken into ash. "Well, whoever it is, they're going to be disappointed. We're having pizza and unpacking. No formal wear required." But as the last ember of the invitation faded, a soft, almost imperceptible melody seemed to drift from the direction of the Grand Ballroom, a distant, melancholic string section, playing a haunting, familiar tune. Elias froze, his hand still poised over the dying embers. Clara heard it too. Her eyes, wide and questioning, met his. "Did you?" Lily had already snatched her headphones off, her face pale. That's Claire de Lune on a cello, I swear." Elias strained his ears, but the sound was gone, swallowed by the profound silence of Blackwood Manor. A trick of the wind, he told himself, the settling of an old house, a tired mind playing games.
Yet, as he turned away from the fireplace, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in Blackwood Manor had just extended its very first invitation, and it didn't appreciate being declined. Chapter 2. The Unseen Host. The following morning dawned muted and gray, the mist still clinging to the trees like a shroud. Elias, rising before Clara and Lily, walked the length of the grand hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He stopped outside the heavy double doors of the grand ballroom, his hand hovering over the cold brass knob. He pushed it open, expecting to find the same dust-sheeted cavern as yesterday.
Instead, a sliver of light, diffused and ghostly, pierced the gloom. The room was still empty, but the dust sheets were gone. Or rather, they had been neatly folded and stacked against a far wall. The ornate chandelier, cleaned to a sparkling brilliance, hung majestically from the ceiling, its crystals catching the faint light from the high windows. The parquet floor, yesterday obscured by grime, now gleamed with a recent polish. And beneath the vast windows, a small, elegant stage had been erected,
upon which stood 4 antique wooden chairs, a cello stand, and 3 music stands. Elias's breath hitched. He wasn't a man given to flights of fancy, but this defied any logical explanation. He had spent the previous day in this house with his family. No one had entered the ballroom. No one could have. The doors had been locked from the inside.
He walked into the room, his shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. He ran a hand over a chair. It was solid, real. He touched a music stand. The wood was smooth, cool. He walked to the window, trying to see if any groundskeepers or eccentric neighbors had been at work. Nothing, just the swirling mist and the ancient, silent trees. Returning to the living room, he found Clara already awake, nursing a mug of tea. Her eyes widened as he described the ballroom. "Elias, are you sure? Maybe you just didn't notice yesterday?" "Clara, I'm an architect. I notice details. That room was a tomb. Now it's waiting." His voice was frayed with a confusion that bordered on fear. Lily, still in her pajamas, patted in, drawn by the tension in their voices. When she heard about the ballroom, her skepticism melted into outright alarm. "Dad, Mom, this isn't funny. First the invitation, then the music, and now this? We need to call the police."
"And tell them what, Lily?" Elias ran a hand through his hair. "That our ballroom magically cleaned itself and set itself up for a non-existent concert? They'd think we're crazy." They spent the day in a state of agitated unease. Elias, driven by a need to understand, scoured the house, searching for hidden rooms, secret passages, anything that could explain the phenomenon. He found nothing. The house was structurally sound, if labyrinthine. Clara, trying to project a semblance of normalcy, began unpacking boxes with a forced cheerfulness, though her gaze kept straying to the grand ballroom doors. Lily, retreating to her room, locked herself in, the muffled thrum of rock music escaping beneath her door.
As dusk deepened, painting the sky in ever-darkening shades of deep indigo, a new invitation appeared. It was tucked neatly under Elias's pillow, where he had been certain he'd left nothing but a freshly changed sheet. This one, too, was the same heavy parchment, crimson seal, elegant script, but its content chilled him to the bone. "Mr. Elias Thorne, your continued work on the West Wing's structural integrity is much appreciated. Please join us for a midnight design brainstorm in the study this evening. Your presence is essential. Attire, business casual. The master of the house awaits your insights." Elias stared at it, his hands trembling. The West Wing. He hadn't even looked at the West Wing yet, beyond a cursory glance. It was a dilapidated section of the house he'd planned to tackle months from now. And the master of the house? Who was this entity? And how did it know what he did, what he planned to do?
He showed it to Clara and Lily. Clara gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Lily looked utterly terrified. "It knows you, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It knows what you do." "This isn't a prank," Elias said, his voice grim. "This is intimate, personal." He crumpled the invitation, but hesitated before tossing it into the now empty fireplace. The thought of it burning, defying whatever entity had sent it, felt somehow dangerous. At precisely 8 o'clock, a faint, ethereal music began to drift from the grand ballroom. It was indeed a classical quartet, playing with exquisite precision, the notes weaving through the vast house, haunting and beautiful. Elias, Clara, and Lily huddled together in the living room, a single lamp their only source of comfort, the fire long since burned out. The music played for what felt like hours, a full, invisible concert, fading only after 11. The silence that followed was oppressive, heavier than before. "I'm not going to the study," Elias declared, his jaw tight. "Good," Clara said, pulling him close. "We're leaving. First thing in the morning, we're packing the car and we're leaving this place." Lily nodded vigorously, her eyes still wide with fear. But Blackwood Manor seemed to have other plans. At midnight, a soft knock echoed from the study door, which was visible from their vantage point in the living room. Elias froze. The door, previously closed, now stood slightly ajar, a sliver of warm, inviting light spilling from within. Then, a voice. It was deep, resonant, and impossibly smooth. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper woven into the very fabric of the house.
Mr. Thorne, we are waiting your insights. The master of the house is most displeased by tardiness. The air grew perceptibly colder. A faint, cloying scent, like lilies and damp earth, filled the room. Lily whimpered, burying her face in Clara's side. Clara clutched Elias's arm, her nails digging into his flesh. Elias, despite his terror, felt a strange, almost magnetic pull towards the study. His architect's mind, always seeking to understand, to solve, wrestled with primal fear. What insights? What master? "Don't go," Clara pleaded, her voice trembling. But something in Elias, a stubbornness born of his professional failures, a need to confront the unknown, finally pushed him forward. He had to understand. He had to face this. He had to protect his family by knowing what they were up against. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice hoarse. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anything." He grabbed an old, heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace, its weight a meager comfort in his trembling hand. As he walked towards the study, the light from within seemed to brighten, beckoning him. The voice, now closer, seemed to hum with an almost impatient energy. "At last, Mr. Thorne, do come in. We have so much to discuss regarding Blackwood Manor's future and your family's. Welcome to your new home." Elias pushed open the study door. The room was not empty. A fire blazed merrily in a large hearth. Antique leather-bound books lined the shelves, catching the firelight. And seated at a magnificent mahogany desk, facing away from him, was a figure. Tall, slender, dressed in what appeared to be formal turn-of-the-century attire. A faint ghostly aura seemed to shimmer around him. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face that was handsome, aristocratic, yet utterly devoid of warmth. His eyes, dark and ancient, seemed to hold the weight of centuries. He smiled, a thin, humorless line that didn't reach his eyes.
"Elias Thorne," the man said, his voice the same resonant whisper that had permeated the house. "We've been expecting you. For generations, in fact." He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Do sit. We have all the time in the world." And Elias, heart pounding, felt a terrifying certainty settle over him. This was no prank. This was no eccentric neighbor. This was the host. And they, the Thorne family, were the uninvited guests, drawn into an eternal event from which escape seemed suddenly, impossibly, far away. Their new home was not a sanctuary, but a meticulously planned trap. Chapter 3. The House Remembers.
Elias found himself seated across from the spectral host, the iron poker suddenly feeling absurdly inadequate in his hand. The man's gaze, though ancient and unsettling, held a strange, compelling intensity. The room itself felt alive, the fire roaring with a supernatural eagerness, the air thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. "Expected?" Elias managed, his voice a strained whisper. "For generations?" The figure, who introduced himself as Alistair, though his presence suggested an essence far older than a mere name, nodded. "Indeed, Blackwood Manor is particular about its residents. It chooses, and it has chosen your line, Mr. Thorne, your aptitude for architecture, your family's unique dynamic, all carefully catalogued. You fit the design perfectly."
Alistair gestured to a stack of architectural drawings on the desk. Elias's own sketches, from his time in college, from forgotten projects, even recent doodles he'd made in his notebook. He hadn't brought them all, some he hadn't seen in years. "Your vision, Mr. Thorne, is precisely what Blackwood requires for its maintenance," Alistair continued, picking up one of Elias's blueprints. "The West Wing, as you intuitively noted, requires a particular hand, a hand capable of bridging the old and the new, of reinforcing the integrity of the past while allowing for the necessary evolutions." Elias stared, horrified. "What are you talking about? What are you—" Alistair chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like autumn leaves. "I am many things, Elias Thorne. A steward, a curator, a manifestation of the Manor's consciousness, if you will. I ensure its perpetual continuation, its life, and you, your family, are integral to that cycle."
He explained, with a chilling calm, that Blackwood Manor was not merely a house. It was a sentient entity, feeding on the life force and memories of its occupants. It created scenarios, invitations, events, drawing its chosen residents deeper into its reality, until they too became part of its fabric. The Blackwood Quartet were the lingering echoes of previous musicians who had performed there, forever trapped in a never-ending concert. The Midnight Design Brainstorm was a recurring event, designed to lure in architects like Elias, captivating them with the promise of completing the Manor's eternal design.
"The invitations are courtesies," Alistair clarified, his eyes glinting. "A formality. You see, the Manor desires willing participation. It is far more satisfying that way. And your family, Mr. Thorne, has a particularly vibrant essence."
He spoke of Clara's boundless optimism, which allowed the Manor to thrive on positive energy, of Lily's youthful skepticism, which the Manor found amusing, a challenge to overcome. Most terrifyingly, he spoke of Elias's own past failures, the gaping void of regret that made him susceptible, eager to prove himself worthy, even to a malevolent house.
"You seek to build anew, Mr. Thorne," Alistair observed, leaning forward, "to redeem past mistakes. Blackwood Manor offers you that opportunity. You can design its eternal future. Your family can be its eternal guests. The way it seeks to draw you in."
Panic clawed at Elias's throat. "No, we're leaving. We're getting out of here."
Alistair merely smiled. "Blackwood Manor is not a place one simply leaves, Elias. It has chosen you. It requires you. The invitations ensured your arrival. Your life force will ensure its continued existence. And theirs." He nodded towards the door, indicating Clara and Lily. "They are already acclimatizing. Can you feel the chill, the isolation, the way it seeks to draw you in?" Elias remembered the creeping dread, the way the mist seemed to press closer, the strange metallic tang in the air. The house wasn't just isolating, it was isolating them. "What if we refuse?" Elias demanded, his voice gaining strength despite his fear.
"Refusal, Mr. Thorne, is a prolonged agony," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing purr. "The Manor grows impatient. It sends more insistent invitations. Perhaps an invitation to Lily's Lost Memories tea party in the nursery, where she might forget who she is. Or Clara's Eternal Bloom Festival in the conservatory, where her optimism might sustain its decaying flora forever, until you willingly accept your place within its design." Alistair rose, his form shimmering. "The master of the house has plans for all of you. Your past failures, Elias, will find their ultimate completion here. You will not only build the future of Blackwood Manor, but become a part of its very foundation." Back in the living room, Clara and Lily had heard enough. Lily was openly sobbing, pressed against Clara, whose face was etched with horror. Elias's brief absence had stretched into an eternity for them. He said it wants us to stay forever," Clara whispered, her voice cracking, "that we become part of it." Elias pulled them both into a tight embrace. "We're not staying, we're getting out." But the house was already working against them. As Elias tried the front door, it didn't budge. He threw his weight against it, again and again, but it was as if the ancient oak had fused with the stone frame. Every window was similarly sealed, the latches either rusted solid or simply gone. The landline was dead. His phone had no signal, the screen displaying only a mocking "no service." The isolation Alistair spoke of was now absolute. They were truly alone, and the house now was their jailer.
Chapter 4. The Manor's Demands. The days that followed blurred into a terrifying kaleidoscope of escalating dread. The house no longer pretended to be serene. It was a predator, slowly tightening its grip. The invisible invitations continued to arrive, sometimes appearing seemingly out of thin air, other times delivered by soft, unseen hands that left them on pillows, tucked into books, or even, once, pressed into Lily's palm while she slept. Each invitation was more personal, more insidious. For Clara, an invitation to a grand ball of forgotten dreams in the newly restored ballroom, beckoning her to dance through the night, forgetting her own life, becoming one of the spectral dancers Elias had briefly glimpsed. For Lily, an urgent summons to the garden of childhood whispers at the stroke of midnight, promising answers to her burgeoning anxieties, a place where she could shed her skepticism and embrace the eternal innocence of the Manor's younger victims.
For Elias, a relentless series of construction planning meetings in the West Wing, where he would find his tools neatly laid out, blueprints for incomprehensible extensions unrolled on a drafting table, and the spectral presence of Alistair, urging him to build, to design, to fulfill his purpose. The family tried to resist. They barricaded doors, attempted to break windows with whatever they could find, even tried to dig at the foundation with garden tools. But the house simply absorbed their efforts. Walls seemed to grow thicker. Glass became unbreakable. The very air seemed to thicken, making escape attempts exhausting and futile. Elias's professional frustration, once directed at failed projects, now festered into a desperate rage against Blackwood Manor. He felt the house trying to subtly bend his architect's mind, to make him see its vision, to make him want to build for it. He would wake up sometimes with sketches of impossible structures flowing seamlessly from the manor's existing design, already forming in his mind. He fought it with every ounce of his will. Clara, initially resilient, began to fray. Her optimism, once a fierce shield, was slowly eroding under the relentless pressure. She would sometimes stare into space, a faint wistful smile on her lips, murmuring about the beautiful gardens or the charming guests of the manor's unseen events. Elias would have to shake her gently, pulling her back from the precipice of acceptance. Lily, however, surprised them. Her youthful skepticism had given way to a fierce protective defiance. She saw through the manor's attempts, identifying the subtle psychological manipulation. "It wants to make us forget who we are," she declared one evening, her eyes sharp and clear, though still holding a haunted fear. "It wants us to want to be part of its fake parties." This observation galvanized Elias. Lily was right. The invitations weren't just demands. They were lures, designed to make them surrender their identities, to become mere echoes like Alistair. One morning, Elias found a new invitation on his workbench, a summons to a legacy unveiling ceremony in the library for him and Clara. It promised to reveal the glorious future of the Thorne lineage within Blackwood, but it was the postscript that caught his breath. "Please ensure Lily attends her coming-of-age dinner in the dining hall this evening. The manor's newest eternal youth requires special attendance." Elias felt a cold dread clamp around him. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about Lily. The house wanted to claim her, to trap her in perpetual youth, unable to grow, to escape. He found Clara in the kitchen, staring at an antique tea set that had materialized on the counter. She was tracing the delicate patterns with her finger,
a faint, dreamy smile on her face. "Isn't it beautiful, Elias? Tonight, for the tea ceremony, I think the manor wants us to truly embrace it." "Clara!" Elias gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "It wants Lily, tonight, to stop her from growing up, to keep her here, forever." The words seemed to pierce through Clara's daze. Her eyes widened, the dreamy smile fading into a mask of terror. Lily, her daughter. A fierce, primal instinct ignited in Clara. Her optimism might have been vulnerable, but her motherhood was unyielding. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No, we won't let it have her."
The family, for the first time since their arrival, found a renewed, desperate unity. Elias, Clara, and Lily huddled together. They knew they couldn't escape physically, but maybe, just maybe, they could refuse its invitations, resist its pull, and fight for their very souls. "We need to break its hold," Lily said, her voice surprisingly steady. "It wants us to accept these invitations, to walk into its traps. What if we don't? What if we disrupt its plans?" Elias looked at his daughter, seeing not a terrified teenager, but a sharp, intelligent young woman. "How, Lily? How do we fight a house?" "It feeds on our identity, our choices," Lily mused, her eyes scanning the vast, oppressive elegance of the living room. "It wants us to become its guests. What if we make it our home instead? What if we choose our own events?"
A desperate, audacious plan began to form in Elias's mind, fueled by the architect's innate desire to bend structures to his will, and a father's fierce need to protect his child. They couldn't leave, but perhaps they could redefine their presence. They wouldn't be guests. They would be the new, uninvited hosts. Chapter 5. Reclaiming the Foundation. The evening of Lily's coming-of-age dinner arrived, heavy with an almost palpable tension. The house hummed with anticipation, the air growing colder, carrying faint echoes of distant spectral chatter. Elias, Clara, and Lily stood in the living room, not dressed in the formal attire suggested by the manor's invitations, but in their regular clothes, a small act of defiance. "We don't go to the dining hall," Elias stated, his voice firm. "We do something else, something we choose."
They decided on the conservatory, the glass-roofed room that the manor had tried to choke with dead plants. If the house fed on their essence, they would starve it of its preferred meal by refusing its menu. Armed with flashlights, a portable speaker Lily had managed to find in her half-unpacked box, and a few old blankets, they marched towards the conservatory. The house seemed to resist, doors along the corridor subtly creaking, cold spots shifting, a faint guttural growl seeming to resonate from the very walls. But they pushed through, a united front. When they entered the conservatory, it was not the decaying space it had been. Every pot held a fresh, vibrant bloom, impossibly lush and fragrant. A long, elegant table was set for 3, laden with food Elias knew hadn't been in their pantry. It was a tempting, beautiful trap. "Wow," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. "It really went all out."
Alistair's voice filled the air. "This is for you, dear Lily. Your eternal youth awaits. Come, partake. Your parents wish to witness your glorious transition."
But Elias had planned for this. "No," he said, his voice echoing with conviction. "This isn't our event." He pulled out the portable speaker. "Lily, play your music." Lily, understanding, scrolled through her phone. Modern pop music, loud and defiant, blasted through the elegant conservatory, an alien sound against the classical whispers of the manor. Clara, with a fierce gleam in her eye, began to unearth the dead plants, tearing them from their pots, ignoring the vibrant, freshly bloomed imposters. "This is our gathering," Clara declared, throwing a wilting vine to the ground. "This is our conservancy, and we're planting new life." Elias, with a sudden burst of inspiration, grabbed a shovel and began to dig into the rich soil of one of the large planting beds. He wasn't digging to plant, he was digging to disrupt. He would not build for the manor, he would reclaim its ground. The house reacted. The lights in the conservatory flickered violently. The vibrant flowers began to wilt, their petals curling and browning at an unnatural speed. The delicious scent of food on the table turned cloying, then putrid. Alistair's voice grew harsh, a furious hiss. You defy the master. You corrupt the design. You invite chaos. As Elias dug, he uncovered something unexpected, a small tarnished silver locket buried beneath the soil. He snatched it up, wiping away the dirt. It contained a faded sepia photograph of a young woman, her eyes wide with a familiar terror.
Lily! Elias shouted over the blaring music. This house feeds on memories, on past lives, on things that are forgotten. We have to bring them into the light. Lily, catching on, began to search. She overturned antique vases, pulled back tapestries. Clara, revitalized by her daughter's insight, joined them, her hands tearing at the velvet curtains. They weren't just disrupting the manor's plans, they were actively disrupting its foundation of forgotten lives. Suddenly, a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Inside, a small leather-bound journal. Clara opened it to find elegant script, a diary entry from 1888. The master demands my presence tonight at the grand ball. I fear I shall never return to my family, my spirit tethered to this ghastly house forever. The atmosphere in the conservatory grew icy, charged with malevolent fury. Shards of glass from high ceiling began to splinter and fall. The beautiful conservatory was trying to collapse in on them. It's fighting back, Lily yelled, pointing to a crack snaking rapidly up a glass panel. Elias saw it. The house was trying to silence them, to bury the truth. But they had found its weakness. It thrived on forgotten pasts, on unacknowledged tragedies. If they brought those memories to light, if they refused to become mere additions to its collection, perhaps they could break its hold. He grabbed a shovel and began to smash the pots of the seemingly eternal flowers, revealing skeletal remains of past flora beneath. Clara found dusty, antique dolls hidden in a wall recess, each doll's porcelain face etched with an uncanny resemblance to a child's portrait she'd seen upstairs. Lily, discovering a loose floorboard, pulled up a collection of rusted toy soldiers, each clutching tiny paper invitations to the eternal war games in the attic.
Each discovery seemed to weaken the manor's direct assault on them. The falling glass slowed. Alistair's voice grew distant, fragmented, as if his essence was being torn apart. "Stop! You betray the manor's purpose! You dismantle its legacy!" "This isn't a legacy," Elias roared, smashing another pot. "It's a prison, and we're tearing down the walls!" The climax came as Elias, driven by a desperate hunch, smashed an ornate, seemingly decorative archway in the conservatory. Behind it, not solid wall, but a crumbling, bricked-up passage, and within it, a chilling sight. A meticulously preserved yet decaying skeleton, still wearing fragments of formal attire, perched in a high-backed chair. On its lap, a single pristine invitation. Your eternal vigil for Blackwood Manor has truly just begun.
This was the master of the house, not Alistair, but an actual physical victim, preserved, perhaps animated, by the house's power. It wasn't just a metaphor. The house literally consumed its occupants, turning them into its permanent, unwitting staff. The revelation was horrifying, yet it also gave Elias a perverse sense of control. This was a structure, and he, an architect, understood structures and how to dismantle them. As Elias shone his flashlight onto the skeletal figure, the house itself seemed to scream. A deep, guttural moan rumbled through the foundations. The lights died completely, plunging them into absolute darkness, save for Elias's flashlight beam. The music from Lily's speaker sputtered and died. Alistair's voice was a ragged, desperate shriek. You have disrupted the cycle. You have betrayed your purpose. You will be forgotten.
But they weren't. As the house convulsed around them, the air was filled not with screams of terror, but with their own shouts of defiance.
"We are the Thornes," Clara yelled, clinging to Lily and Elias. "And we are leaving." "We're writing our own story," Lily added, her voice strong despite the darkness. Elias, seeing the opening, the hidden passage revealed by the collapsed archway, felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. Not an escape through the front door, but an escape into the undocumented, forgotten parts of the house itself, the parts the manor hadn't fully assimilated. "Follow me," he shouted, grabbing Clara and Lily. "We're rebuilding our own path." Chapter 6. Echoes of Freedom. The hidden passage was dark, choked with cobwebs and the musty scent of forgotten time. It was a labyrinth of crumbling brick, dusty timber, and the unsettling whispers of the manor's dying rage. Elias, flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive gloom, led the way, his heart pounding, not just with fear, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He was an architect, and he was navigating his family through the defiant escape he was building for them, one step at a time. Behind them, the conservatory groaned, the sound of splintering glass and collapsing masonry echoing in the distance. The house was tearing itself apart, unable to withstand their rebellion, the exposure of its dark secrets. Alistair's voice, now a pathetic, fragmented wail, seemed to chase them through the dusty tunnels, growing fainter with every turn. No, the cycle, broken, forgotten. They crawled through narrow crawl spaces, descended rickety wooden ladders, and squeezed through gaps in the ancient stone. Lily, usually prone to complaining, was silent, her small flashlight beam unwavering, her determination a silent testament to the resilience they had found as a family. Clara, bruised and disheveled, held Elias's hand tightly, her optimism now hardened into a fierce resolve. Hours later, disoriented and exhausted, they emerged into the cold, damp air, not from the front of Blackwood Manor, but from a disused cellar entrance hidden beneath a tangle of ancient ivy at the very edge of the vast estate. The mist was thicker than ever, swirling around them like seeking hands, but for the first time, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a curtain, shielding their escape. They didn't look back. They just ran, their legs aching, their lungs burning, until the looming silhouette of Blackwood Manor was swallowed by the mist. They didn't stop until they reached the nearest town, a small, sleepy hamlet miles away, where they stumbled into a gas station, their appearance covered in dirt, scratches, and a wild, haunted look in their eyes, sending the lone attendant scrambling for the phone. The authorities, when they arrived, listened to their unbelievable story with a mixture of skepticism and concern. They checked Blackwood Manor, of course, but found nothing. The house stood, silent and imposing, yet utterly unremarkable. The conservatory was intact. The grand ballroom, according to their report, was dusty and disused. No hidden passages, no skeletal figures, no Alistair. Elias knew better. The manor had simply closed its wounds, absorbing the physical evidence of their disruption, receding into its own dark reality. But they had seen it, they had lived it, and they knew the truth.
The Thornes never returned to Blackwood Manor. They sold it sight unseen, at a considerable loss, managing to erase its legal claim on their lives. But the house left its indelible mark. Elias, the stoic architect, was forever changed. He still designed, but with a new understanding of foundations, not just of buildings, but of identity. He focused on restoring old, neglected structures, giving them new life, not as prisons, but as homes. He no longer feared failure. He feared only the loss of self. Clara's radiant optimism was tempered with a profound understanding of darkness, a quiet strength that made her more grounded, more resilient. She cherished every moment of their ordinary, uninvited lives, knowing how easily it could be stolen.
Lily, the skeptical teenager, grew into a woman with an uncanny intuition, an unshakable sense of self. She pursued a career in history, compelled to uncover forgotten stories to ensure that no one else was consumed by unacknowledged pasts. She knew the importance of remembering. The family healed, but they were bound by an unspoken understanding, a shared trauma that had forged them into an unbreakable unit. They learned that some invocations are best left declined, some doors best left locked, and some homes are not meant to be lived in, but survived. And sometimes, late at night, in the quiet solitude of their new, ordinary suburban home, a faint, ethereal melody would drift on the wind, a whisper of classical strings, a haunting reminder of the uninvited guest, that still stood, silent and patient, in the misty New England countryside, forever waiting for its next chosen family, its next eternal event.